Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Hope you guys are doing good. So grateful for our time together today, especially to talk about this topic. It's something that I find is so present in our community, our close knit community, as well as the greater world. And I'm really passionate about this topic because I find it can be so lonely when you have conflict within yourself and you feel like every single person that you talk to is giving you different advice. And then when you actually ask yourself, you don't know where your inner voice is. So I'm really grateful that we get to kind of dive into these topics together and have a better understanding of how to navigate inner conflict of to do or just to be. So thank you guys again for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen with you so that you guys can see right away. And as you know, I always love for webinars or any programming that we do together for you guys to feel free to use the chat at any point. It also helps me understand if you want to share something or get some live coaching, or maybe if you have something to add or contribute to the space. I know that sometimes when you add something, it might be for you, but it also might be for someone else. So we might think that we're sharing as a way to express ourselves, but someone else receiving that, they're like in a totally different headspace of like, oh, wow, I really needed to know that I wasn't by myself or lonely in that thought or feeling that I had. So again, thank you guys for just showing up and playing full out in our experience today together. So we're talking about inner conflict, action, or surrender. Um, Today we're leaning into the unknown and discover how to play the middle ground between doing and being as we break down this interesting topic. Join like-minded community and unearth your authentic strength of knowing when to say enough and when to walk away. Oh, those dang boundaries. Okay, so for me, most of you know me, pretty much all of you know me actually, but for anyone that's watching this recording that might not, my name is Ashley. I am a teacher, leader, speaker in the space of wellness and health. I'm a master NLP trainer and a yoga therapist. I also lead meditation, and I'm lucky enough to be surrounded by an incredible community of people, light workers that make such a huge impact in the world, especially in the context of mind, body, soul. So we do a lot of movement practices together. We do meditation, we do breath work. We also do teacher training programs and retreats in personal development, growth, and expansion. And a lot of it honestly comes back to soul work, even though sometimes we use movement as a vehicle or like our physical body as a way to get to deepen our relationship with our soul. But we're all going to the same place and we all have the same goal and we're going in the same direction. So I have the privilege and honor to be able to do this on a daily basis. This is like my full-time experience of reality, which is so great. So let's start with some grounding. I'm sure we all really need it, from being in the middle of a workday to hopping into a webinar about inner conflict. Who knows how much inner conflict your bosses are feeling about this? So just find a seated posture, close your eyes if you're able to. And then together, let's take a big breath in and exhale. And just start to tune into your senses. Reach your felt sense of your heart out a little wider so you can not only just feel what you're feeling, but also feel what's underneath it. What is that deeper yearning? Or maybe that expectation that's unmet of what you're asking out of life. Or maybe a sense of fullness. Gauge and observe where you are in this moment. What kind of energy are you bringing to this call? What kind of day have you been having, and how does that impact your energy, your life force, your vitality, your alertness, your receptivity? How open-minded you might be to this information? Just observing and remembering to give yourself permission for all of it to be valid and acceptable. And then inhale to fill up. Exhale to let go. And then whenever you feel ready, you can blink your eyes open and find yourself back here in our space together, just noticing and acknowledging the shift in how you feel and arriving back to a place of, again, alertness, ready to hear information. Cool. So me, I grew up with a really indecisive mother, if you will. And so that was my model of where to go, what to do. And I remember always her being able to flip her mind in like a moment, like an instance. She could go from one extreme to the other so easily. Um, and there wasn't a whole lot of certainty in herself. And I remember watching her making big decisions around remodeling the house or what type of therapy to put my brother in or whatever. And it was always like, that's okay, guys. It was always like anyone that would give her a different opinion, she would sway like a pendulum one direction and the other. And we always know that if a pendulum goes one way really far, it's going to swing back the other way equally as far. And there's quite the bit of energy that will come back in the other direction. So, me observing that, it's interesting because it gave me kind of the polar opposite take where I was like, I never want to feel that way. I never want to feel uprooted or like I can't make decisions for myself. And so, I think the wishy-washiness is kind of hard for me to process and understand because I've worked so hard to move away from that energy. And so that's kind of where this webinar was birthed out of is like for those of us, and of course I have lots of moments that I don't feel certain about things, but this webinar was definitely birthed out of wanting to create tools and resources for those of us that when we don't know, we learn how to trust ourselves more. We learn how to realize that our inner guidance system actually has a really strong voice if we learn how to listen to it. Because so often there's so much stimulation around us, there's so many voices, there's so much going on that it can be really challenging to know like which is the right thing to pay attention to and which thing is true, which thing is authentic, what is real for me, what's the right choice, what's the right decision. And so that's kind of where this all came from. And next, I would just love to hear from you, anyone that wants to unmute themselves and share, or even if you want to pop some stuff in the chat. What reoccurring challenge are you faced with internally? Like, what is something that creates inner conflict for you that is something you can't escape or get away from, or you're working really hard on? And it could be maybe a toxic relationship, it could be remembering your value, it could be moving to another city. Like, what is something that you feel like comes up often and might feel like it kind of almost paralyzes you? Again, you can unmute or in the chat, whichever works.
Hello.
Hi.
I think just like the constant battle of things will be going really well, and then I'll remember like things that I used to do when I was younger and just like get mad at myself. So like forgiveness, internal forgiveness, and just instead of just trying to tell myself, well, those things made me who I am today, actually like coming to peace with those things, you know?
Yeah, totally. So it sounds like it's a bit of the negative self-talk that comes up around guilt and shame. Is there action that comes out of that, or does it just like poo-poo your mood?
I mean, these days it's a lot better. Like I'll feel like shit for a couple minutes, thankfully only, and then I'll kind of like try to pull myself out of the rut using like a lot of the different things that we use and that we work on all the time. So like especially like the deep breathing helps me a lot. And then trying to reframe. So that helps tremendously. But yeah, I think that was a recent thing. I was thinking about that actually today. I was like, ugh, get out of here, thought.
Totally. And I mean, we've all seen, or many of us have seen the movie Inside Out, and it's like there's a whole committee up there of different emotions, different little people that are telling us different things. And some of our committees are pretty large and they have lots of like different styles and formats of people. Like there's a Karen, there's a negative Nancy, there's a shithead Bob, like there's all these dick people that like have so much to say and to figure out which of these voices actually are the truth because so many of us can go down that rabbit hole of, okay, like I'm besties with Karen right now and she's right and I have her back. And then all of a sudden it spirals us into a dark space of not allowing ourselves to really see clearly of what the truth is versus what we're telling ourselves or the narrative, right? And we'll get into that too. Bree has making decisions, worrying if the decision I'm making is the right one, right? Like, okay, picking a choice and then you pick it and then you go through your brain of all the reasons why you should have done something else. I so get that. Don't get me started. I just ordered a second wedding dress. I'm a catastrophe. I have two wedding dresses right now, and one of them I have to somehow get rid of. Don't even. Olivia feeling like I'm good enough or doing enough, right? Yeah, totally. And that creates a lot of conflict because what results out of even that is this sense of not enoughness. So that everything we do is so people pleasing, or maybe we'll do things and then test out the waters of the results or the responses from others. And then if it's not what we desire, we'll either throw a tantrum, get upset, get down on ourselves, try to make ourselves small or adjust our being in order to fit in or to fit some standard that we didn't even realize was created by our own mind's eye. Yeah, thank you guys. These are all really pertinent and vulnerable. So thanks for sharing these. So here's the biggest question is how much do you trust yourself on a scale from 1 to 10? And you can put it in the chat if you'd like. I guess it depends on the day sometimes, right? Or like the time of day, or if everything in your life is going right. And hey, that is the biggest um, misconception of our reality as human beings is that it's so easy to trust ourselves to be happy, to be joyful, to be creative, to be expressive when all the things in our life are like aligning. You know, when the stars align and work's going great and your relationship's going great and da 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 da. And then all of a sudden, like one thing kind of starts teetering, and then you're like, uh oh. And then another thing, and then another thing. And you're like, oh my God, the world hates me. I don't trust myself. What am I doing? And all that doubt because of external circumstance, right? So we're letting the external circumstance mirror our ability to say, I trust you. I know you're going to get through this, right? Reoccurring challenge of decision to move and self-actualize that which ultimately comes back to the battle of confidence, playing big. Yeah. And also, I mean, I have to start and pre-frame it now, even though it's like a big quote I wanted to say at the end. A lot of times that like the conversation of I'm worried about moving or committing or da 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 da, it's more so that you're afraid of your potential. Like you're afraid of who the fuck you'd be if you were your full self. Like you're like, oh wow. Davin, did you have something to add?
Sorry, did I raise my hand or something?
No, I think you unmuted, but all
Oh,
good.
I did. And then I didn't see my opportunity. But
Your
when you say
opportunities now.
trust, yeah. When you say trust yourself, in what sense? Because like if it's trusting myself to do the right thing in the scenario, yes. Trust myself to get something accomplished that I'm struggling with, then yeah, that would be lower on the scale.
Totally. I think it's interconnected because there might be things that you're really confident and good at, but that layer of trust, meaning if shit hits the fan, do I believe in my ability to figure this out? I think it's that part. Like if all of my weaknesses were poked and I was my lowest low, do I have full-fledged faith that I'm going to figure out the solution or the answer? And the answer is probably no, because I don't know one human being on the planet that's like, if I was so triggered and everything went wrong, like, I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I would feel defeated. Maybe I would feel unresourced. Maybe I would need to reach out for help. But like, I don't know that I have that ability. And that's okay too. But it's a question that we're posing because how many times do we ask ourselves that question? Makes you think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, Rach, trusting yourself and the universe for sure. Big time. It's an interesting question. It's a question that you know, it's hard to answer, and I've shared a little bit with some of you, but you know, still working through it, and I'm kind of on the other, like I'm at the light at the end of the tunnel space now, but you know, we had a couple months there. It was like right after teacher training when things started to get a little rocky. Like I wasn't sure what was happening with the business, and there was some transition in our staff, and just everything was happening at once, and I was in a dark space. Like I could show up and functionally present as everything's together, it's cool, we got it, like let's just move on, business as usual. But the undertone of every morning, I woke up in a fog and I was like, I don't want to face the day. And that was happening, you know, kind of behind the scenes. And while vulnerability and authenticity is my number one value, I also like this question is the thing that got me out of bed every day. Is I was like, okay, granted, I've never had this many days in my life that I've woken up and felt like not enough. I've never had that in my life until a few months ago. But I also knew that I have a 100% track record of getting through everything I've ever been through. And I have been through more challenging stuff, even though it wasn't as long term. So I gave myself the ability to wake up with faith of like, okay, while I don't have the answer right now, I trust that at some point this is going to pass. I might not know when, I might not know how, I might not know what the solution is, even though my Virgo, pit of fire, rational brain is like, I'm going to just fucking take action and get my way out of this. But we all know that that's not always the answer. Sometimes when you try to take action for something, you need to wait and allow to arrive into your space and like listen instead of speak. That's excruciating. That's the hardest part because you're like, okay, cool. So you're just asking me to sit here and trust that everything's going to work out when my insides are screaming, my heart doesn't have a safe landing pad right now. Like that's what God, universe are asking me to do right now. And it's really hard to do. And it means that you kind of have to uproot a piece of your bravery that is like the reserve tank. You're like, all right, well, if I'm willing to do this, if I'm willing to trust this experience, it means that I have to balls to the wall surrender. Like I'm willing to have zero control right now and actually do the work. Like I'm going to be in the arena like Brene Brown talks about, and I'm going to just fight whatever shows up because I'm willing and because I have a will to live, a reason to be here, you know? So let's get a little woo-woo, intuitive connection. Believing our intuition is the place where the quality of our relationship to self-trust begins. How loud is your inner voice? And which one of your inner voices takes over your dominant choices? So, in respect to this, when we were conceived as babies, right, or as fetuses, all we had was our intuition. Before our eyes, our brain, our heart, our lungs, our ears, before any of that was developed, we were born, or rather, even created, with a sense of consciousness, intuition. So if you think of like an acorn, when the acorn is planted, it's planted with intelligence. It's not planted as a walnut tree that's massive and beautiful and bears nuts to give the earth. It's born just with wisdom and intelligence and intuition to know that my job is not to become a squirrel. My job is not to become a dog. My job is not to become a human. My job is to become a giant, beautiful walnut tree or oak tree, whatever the acorn's seed or intelligence is. And so every single one of us human beings are born innately with intuition, whether it's clouded by years of drugs or self-worth issues or the wrong relationships or sexual abuse or whatever it is. It could be like our judgment and our connection with our intuition could be clouded, but we all are born with it. It's like an auto program. It's like getting an iPhone with an Android software system. It's just not going to happen, right? So if you're programmed with intuition, the only assignment is to believe it, to go back into your roots and just like have that gut feeling and know that that gut feeling is really true for you. And so what that looks like is paying attention to when, you sit down for a business deal or an interview or an uncomfortable conversation and like inside you're like, something's up right now, but you want so bad to believe that that thing is true because you might want the results or the potential in that information. Like it might feel good to believe the idea of it. But inside, there's some little tinkling voice that's like, hey, I just need you to pay attention right now because something's up here. We all have that. We all have that. And if you wait, like for example, we'll talk a little later about the 5-second rule by Mel Robbins. If you wait, you'll talk yourself out of believing it. So all of a sudden we're spiraling in this analytical Vata brain of like, okay, is that really a hit? Did I really hear that? Are we sure? Like inner knowing, inner guidance system, do you want to figure it out? Is it possible that you're lying to me right now? Because this deal looks pretty good. This person looks pretty good, you know? And it's like, no, just believe it. Believe it off the bat. It's there for you. third eye, Rach, I know you're going to love the art on here. Oh, yeah. So the third eye is the Ajna chakra, the space between our eyebrows on the forehead. This is the sixth chakra. And in the chakra system, there are wheels of energy essentially that run just different domains in our life and connect to different parts. The Ajna, the third eye chakra, is the upper realm of chakras. So it's more higher, more sparse, more ethereal, whereas the lower chakras are more human, tangible, gross, physical. Whereas as you move up, it's more subtle. So when we talk about the third eye, we're talking about the woo-woo. We're talking about the stuff that you can't see, you can't calculate. Well, quantum physics says you can now, so you can't really calculate it. You can't say 2 + 2 is 4 when you talk about wisdom and intuition. And I remember one time when we were in our first teacher training, one of our students, Kaylee, she was like, I'm really into science and I'm really into equations and solutions and things making sense. But I never understood how you could know something with absolute certainty and someone could discount the truth of that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. Because some of this, the spirit stuff, like we feel it so deeply, you can't take away from what you know with absolute certainty in your soul. That's to me bigger than science, right? And the difference is it that you know it in your soul, or is it that your trauma is telling you a story that's a little cloudy, right? But when we know with absolute certainty, when we can see so clearly, there isn't really a whole lot of wiggle room. It becomes pretty black or white. So the third eye represents vision, intuition, clear thought, spiritual contemplation, and self-reflection. It also helps to determine one's reality and beliefs based on what one chooses to see in the world. Okay. The placement of third eye is where the pituitary gland lives, and she's the queen of the endocrine system, which is interesting because the hormones and processes is the pituitary gland's job is to oversee that, and so is the third eye's job in the spiritual realm of like, what am I overseeing? What am I keeping checks and balances on? So think of the third eye as like that wizard that's like, that's kind of fishy. Oh, that's okay. Okay, cool. Like just making sure all the spreadsheets line up, right? Like making sure everything makes sense. Everything's kind of in alignment. It's again, just that checks and balances system. So really where we get tripped up in this conversation of inner conflict is uncertainty and contemplation. As we said, it's the first answer usually that comes to mind is the right one that's connected to our intuitive wisdom. It's talking ourselves in and out of things. Leave or stay in a relationship. Maybe some of you have been this person. Maybe you've seen it in a friend or a family member that you love. I've definitely been this person. My first partner, it was a total train wreck, and we probably broke up like 642 times for sure in the time we were together, because it was this constant toxic trauma bond of I love you and I need you versus I love you and I want you. And those are two very different places to be. And so my inner guidance system always knew that it was a very toxic, abusive relationship. But I spent so much time thinking about it and letting the trauma bond cloud my vision that I stayed. I stayed way longer than I should have. And thank God the universe like showed me for somehow, some way at a certain point when I was like, okay, enough, we're done here. But it took a lot to get there. It took a lot. Choosing is so different than needing in our nervous system. It's so true. Thank you for that beautiful addition. It feels nice to choose. It feels nice to be like, I'm here because I want to be here, not I'm here because I need to be here. It's like FOMO or JOMO, like the joy of missing out, the fear of missing out. Like, I'm stoked, Be right or let go. This is a good one. A lot of us fight to dig our heels into the ground versus doesn't even matter, right? Doesn't even matter. Let's choose peace. Push yourself in a workout or take it easy, right? The mentality of working hard and the David Goggins mentality of, get hard, get strong, forget about pain, show up instead, right? There's actually a really fine line between that being healthy and that being really toxic and harmful. And I've always leaned on the side of show up anyway, but there's times that I don't show up anyway. There's times that I actually have to listen to the take it easy side of it. And I think between the cultural norm of hustle, right? Hustle more, consumerism, all of that. That puts us on the side of push yourself more versus take it easy. So I find actually like our meditation classes on our schedule probably do better than most of the HIIT classes, most of the workout classes. Not that they're not important, right? Like moving your body and uprooting shit, like classes like Awake, HIIT stuff, cycle, like that stuff's really important. But having an everyday practice where you shut up and listen instead of blast music in your brain, that's getting to be the deepest medicine for most of us. Commit to healthy eating or let yourself have it. We talk a lot about this too in our community around our food choices, because for the most part, like I think if you're healthy, generally a higher percentage than unhealthy. Obviously, you have to learn to surrender. But the back and forth of, I'm not going to have it. Oh, I'm going to have it. Oh, I'm not going to have it. Oh, I'm going to have it creates that dense energy of stuckness. It's like clouding with all the riffraff of conversation that impedes our body's ability to just process something and move on. Kelly Levesque told us in our first teacher training also that science proves that the energy you take or the energy you have in which when you eat or take food that is unhealthy affects the way your body can process it, your body's ability to process it. So if you're going to eat a donut, don't make a stink about it, right? Like eat the donut, be a happy person, move on, find joy in your life, and your body's going to be like, great, we're done. But if you're eating it and you're badgering yourself and beating yourself up constantly, your body's going to clench and retain, and it's going to be harder for your body to process that. And so while this concept, with one donut, it's actually not really that big of a deal, but when you start to talk about our relationship to food of, am I going to order in, or am I just going to cook, or am I just going to put something healthy together? Like we have to create a balance in that relationship, but also give ourselves the chance to choose what's best for us. And then set a boundary or surrender. I know you guys know this conversation very well, especially with our family, right? Like I talk a lot about my triggering relationships in my family, and like today my dad he came by earlier and he brought Luna to have a little play date with August, our dogs, while he was at the dentist, which was fine, and he was supposed to be back earlier. He was back an hour late, and he walked in like 5 minutes before the webinar started, and I was like, I'm sorry, like I don't have the ability to spend time with you right now because this is my commitment. And so it was just, I'm sorry and I love you, let's find time to talk, versus the boundary could have been like, hey, like I really need you to communicate with me. It's not okay that you did this, da 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 da. That wasn't worth it to me in that moment, right? Because it didn't feel necessary. I actually wanted to just surrender and preserve our relationship. So I was like, hey, you know what? It's all good. Let's just talk later, and create that opening instead of that hard closing. Because a boundary doesn't always need to be set in words. Sometimes it can be set in action or in inaction also, right? Like not responding to a text after a certain time, or maybe not answering a phone call when you're not resourced. Like that's an example of setting a boundary in a way that you're kind of surrendering, right? You don't have to be in someone's face. Like, don't do that. How dare you, blah, 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 blah. And then here's where it all comes to fruition. Every single thing that you choose is the right thing if you've chosen it fully. When you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, you're going to make yourself crazy trying to believe that it's the right thing, especially for those of you that shared that you were like, I don't want to make the wrong decision. If you make a decision and you're all in on that decision, it will be the right choice. Because whatever you pick has built within it the intelligence to support you in your growth. Because if you've chosen it, you can show up to it, and then whatever doesn't work or quote fails is actually feedback so you can do something different next time. It's kind of like, for example, it's like why, people like Steve Jobs wore the same thing every single day. They don't need a lot of decisions to make. They don't need a lot of this and that. It's like, I've made this choice, that's all, and they can save their brain power for other things. But the amount of energy it takes to be unsure about something and to say maybe this, maybe that, that's a lot more challenging, right? That takes a lot more. And so whatever you deem to be your truth will be your truth. And so I'll ask you guys, how is that statement right there affected by those things? The perceptual position of your perspective, meaning if you have a certain viewpoint on something, maybe your belief system is rooted in a certain religious belief, or I'm not a morning person, or blah, 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 that is going to impact your truth. If I say my truth is I'm not a morning person, that's going to be true. And so if my perceptual position, my perspective is I'm not a morning person, and then someone like Ashley Schubert comes along and is like, you are what you say you are. Let's try saying I'm not an evening person and getting to bed early and getting up, like trying that. And I'm like, nope, this is my truth. It's going to keep me gridlocked in that perspective forever. So while, yes, whatever I choose and I commit to is great, like ignorance is bliss, how is that affected by the perspective in which I've adopted? And then your blind spots, of course. Have I created a conclusion about something based on something that I don't see? So for example, if I'm someone that's inherently late all the time, I'm always late. But when I show up, I'm like, oh no, actually, you're late because we said this time, or there was so much traffic, or blah, 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 blah. And I'm making all these excuses and dodging the bullet or the accountability of that I'm always late. My blind spot is not allowing my truth to be something that's in alignment with reality. So it's like the inner conflict is actually me not being willing to see beyond my blind spot, right? Or like maybe your perspective is your partner shouldn't show up in a certain way. Well, who's to say that your opinion about that is based on truth and reality or based on your own trauma? And those are little conversations that we should be having with ourselves. And that's why, like, all of this stuff we're talking about is only applicable if you're actually holding up a mirror to your own shit, right? You can't actually apply every answer is the right answer and your truth will be your truth to someone who's deeply in their trauma or wearing the lens, the goggles of subconscious is protecting me and keeping me safe by keeping me small, right? You can't actually receive any of this information. Stubborn attitude, your subconscious keeping you safe, right? Like, this is my truth. This is what I'm choosing. I'm going to limit myself in this way. I'm not going to show up in this way. I'm not going to go after this business opportunity because I don't deserve it, right? Like, is that really true? Is that really your truth? And guys, feel free to chime in if you have questions or thoughts on this. Doing versus being. So doing, as we all know, gives us relief from our anxiety often. So if we say, I'm going to take action, I'm going to, I can't sit still and meditate, so I'm going to clean the house and do the laundry and da-da-da-da-da. I walk in the kitchen and there's dishes everywhere. And if that's not done, I can't feel settled. Like, I was cooking lunch earlier and there's dishes everywhere. And I was so frustrated by it because I'm like, why doesn't anyone in this house do dishes? And I was like, oh, I can't cook my food until all these dishes are cleaned. And then I was like, wait, hold on. Like, there's so much doing in this that's distracting me from the goal of what I want, right? And so transitioning over to being means I'm willing to sit with urgency without action. And so which one are you applying in what situation? Which one is necessary? And usually the one that's the most uncomfortable is the medicine. The one you don't want to do is the medicine. So if you're like a person that is afraid to take action because you're paralyzed all the time, you need to get your ass up and kick into gear. If you're someone that's always doing and keeps yourself busy so you don't actually hear what's going on underneath the surface, you're the person that needs to sit and wait, right? And I actually find that my partner and I are polar opposites, right? Like, I do way more than I should, and he likes to be way more, in my opinion, than he should. So when things happen, I'm quick to say, ba, 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 let's talk about it. And he's quick to say, hold on, like, I need to process this. And so if you look at that situation, like, both of us could take a page out of each other's book where I can say, hold on, I actually need to sit with this to understand myself more. And maybe he can spring into gear a little sooner of, let's come to a resolution, for example. Did that answer your question, Rach? Okay, cool. And time gives perspective. I always find that even though doing can be important for someone who's generally paralyzed, is that if you are feeling emotional charge about something, usually doing is not really the place that you want to go into, right? There's a difference between procrastinating and giving a little time to resonate, giving a little space to say, what is it that I really want? Is my blind spot taking over here? Is there something that I'm conflicted by or something that I'm not willing to allow myself to show up to? And so I would say too, with some of this stuff, like if you are in a space where you're feeling a lot of, depression or sadness or not enoughness, right? Doing is going to probably be great for depression or sadness because sadness is kapha. Sadness is really heavy, right? So like go get in the sun, go paint something, go breathe fresh air, go on a walk, right? That's good for sadness. But the other part of not enoughness, you don't want to do. You're probably already overworked and overwhelmed and burned out at your job because all you're doing is doing. So maybe that person that's stuck in the not enoughness needs to be more. Just like I said, I was in, a couple months ago of like, I just need to be. And even though I don't know the answer, I'm willing to wait for it. I'm willing to wait until things start to shift and change. I've got a little dotted background because I feel like that's what resentment looks like if I had to give it a picture to me. Once you've made the choice, once you've said, this is what I'm doing, this is the choice I'm making, and you with absolute certainty commit to that choice and you start taking action or being or whatever it is around that choice, do you feel resentful? Is there resentment present? Are you angry about it? Right? This is again something that I'm working on with my partner because he has a lot going on because he's starting this NFT project. He's working a lot, and sometimes he'll commit to coming to spend a lot of time with my family, like overcommit, and then he's upset later, right? So for him, I know it would give him more peace, for example, to just pause and put some space and say, maybe I can't commit to that. And that's how I think a lot of us function, where we overcommit and underdeliver, and then we feel angry about it. Or we make a choice and then we're like, oh God, why did I make that choice? And it's not the confusion thing. It's not the, well, if I did this, then this would happen. If I did that, then this would happen. No, it's like genuinely deep inside, I have resentment. And then it goes towards the people we love. Zavi.
So it's interesting that you brought up resentment, no mistakes. So last night, like, of course, because Awake is amazing and shakes things up in us, I was definitely present with like resentment because I felt like I was playing small by saying I shouldn't go to Tulum. And I was like, I don't deserve it yet. I'm still getting my life like in order from what it was a year ago, which I'm grateful where it is right now, like number one. But I just felt that like I was really mad at myself because I said, oh, you don't deserve to go. And it's like, no, it's the best way to put it. I think I was resentful more with myself of saying I didn't deserve it than not going, if that makes sense. Totally. Of me telling myself like, oh, you know what, like until you've handled the A, B, and C and, you feel like you deserve it, that you shouldn't even think about going out of town or like leaving for that long and all these, like, all of it was just coming up for me last night, like so hard. And then it was kind of like me deciding between FOMO and truly wanting to be with you guys and continue this beautiful journey. And like, the fact is like reality, this journey continues no matter what.
Okay, let me, it's probably declined because it's over.
Continue.
Oh, sorry. So yeah, I'm trying to get back. So yes, what I realized is that, I miss more than anything, or I'm going to miss more than anything being there with you guys, but it doesn't mean that the work doesn't continue. But I also am figuring out how to be comfortable with myself in making that choice and not feeling like I sold myself short,
Yeah.
because like this work means so much to me. Like being able, seeing where I was a year ago and seeing where I am now, like is different completely. I talk to myself differently. Is there more work to do? Yes. But yeah, it was just this realization, I guess, last night of like being okay with not being there. I hope that makes sense.
Totally. And that's a really awesome example. So thank you for bringing that up because, you know, at the end of the day, like your decision had come from a place of scarcity versus abundance. And that's where the resentment came from, right? Of like, I'm not enough to receive this versus I'm choosing not to do this because I'm choosing something else in place of it, right? And that's a really powerful realization. And I can see 100% for all of us that resentment would be present if you choose something out of scarcity as if you don't deserve it, right? And making a little space in that stimulation and that moment of doubt to ask yourself that question of like, am I resentful right now because of the way I feel about the situation? Am I making this choice based on trauma or based on scarcity or based on not enoughness? Because we are capable of a lot more than we think we are. And it's okay that we don't always give ourselves credit. But the ability to snap back and come back into awareness of our power and our light, that's the gift that we should all be focusing on strengthening because we all have that ability, right? We're resilient. We're naturally born with that as well as our intuition. We're naturally born with the ability to grow through things. And it happens even faster in community, that's for sure. Because I love when people call me on my shit. I might not like it at first, but then after a little while, I come around to it, you know? Is there more work to do? Yes. Have you shifted? Yes. That mindset is abundant as shit. Yeah, totally. Love that. So we have a little footnote on here. Can you be unattached or at least confident in the decision that you're making? That's exactly what you said. Are you suffering deeply? Is there inner conflict still? And then most importantly, this doesn't mean that a big decision won't sometimes hurt and feel confusing, right? Like you can feel frustrated and sad at the same time. Like if you were like, oh, I chose not to go because I'm working on getting all my things in order and my ducks in a row. And instead it looks like squirrels at a rave, right? Like that's okay. Sometimes that happens. But at the end of the day, of course, you're going to still feel sad to not go, even if you chose for the right reasons. Of course. And that's okay. But the difference is there resentment? You know, is there resentment? I feel sad about 2 fucking wedding dresses. I'm like, that's ridiculous. This is so wasteful. This is so not good. And while I'm frustrated about it, I know that it was the right decision. I'm not feeling resentful about it. Right?
FYI, Ashley, I bought 2 too, and I only wore 1.
Oh, shit. Okay, I'm not alone. Ash D, don't follow suit. We're not examples. Don't listen to us. We're bad models. Okay, The Tale of Two Wolves. You guys, this story, when I first heard it, I'm sure you've heard it before. Wow, this rocked my world. An old Cherokee Indian is teaching his grandson about life. A fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It's a terrible fight, and it's between 2 wolves. One is evil. He is anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. He continued, the other wolf is good. He is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, faith. And the same fight is going on inside of you and every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which wolf wins? And the Cherokee replied, the one you feed. And I loved this so much. I've always loved this because it's gotten me through my darkest days. It's gotten me through the moments when I didn't think I'd figure it out. It's gotten me through the moments where I felt so alone because I'm like, there's no way anyone else on the planet can feel this conflicted inside. There's no way someone can feel, wow, I know at my core I'm like this innocent human that is like pure love and light and has so much to give and is so loving. But yet I've seen like some nasty sides of myself. I've seen myself do really dark things and hurt people unintentionally, but have, attitude or cut corners, or like there's things in my life that I've done. And, for those of you, I think Mila, even you talked about shame, of like old previous versions of you, to know that both sides exist and they're not your I am. They're not your identity. Because your identity is like simple. Your identity is only one thing. What do you guys think it is? You can write in the chat. What is your identity? It's one thing. That's it. Spirit, same word as what I was going to use. Anyone else? Like who you are. Energy. I am.
Love.
It's love. It's pure love. And that's another word for all the words you guys are putting in the chat, which I love. Heart, it's beautiful, Liv. Who you are is love. And love heals all, dissipates all. That's it. So all of these things on the two opposition sides of the wolves, right? Like the darkness and the nastiness and the greed, like we all have access to that, right? We've all been that. It's super easy. We could play that part. Like it's not a problem. We know how to do that. We know how to do it well, most of us. Let's be honest. And then the other side of the joy, the peace, the serenity, like the funniness, like all that stuff, we can do that too. Neither side is who we are, because who we are is just pure, and that's it. And so to dissociate from these versions, or this is like another example, the wolves are part of the committee, like the Karens and the Nancys and the Bobs, they're all part of the committee. So when we dissociate, we're no longer saying I am that or I am this. And when we dissociate from the I am of those things, we're so much more, and the truth becomes more accessible. Inner conflict is no longer really a thing, because we're not conflicted. We're just looking at everyone that's sitting at the table saying, I'm so glad that you guys all have opinions, but like I already know the truth. Right? The 5-second rule. Many of you have studied this book with me in one of our mentorship rounds. The 5-second rule by Mel Robbins is a concept that she developed. She's a motivational speaker. When she was deep, dark in her deepest depression, she was about to lose her home. Her business was going bankrupt. She was an alcoholic. Everything was hitting the fan at the time. And she couldn't get out of bed. Every day getting out of bed was like the hardest thing in the world for her. And again, we've all had these moments. And so she was watching TV and she saw a rocket ship that was taking flight, and the person that was cueing it was counting backwards from 5, saying 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, take off. And she's like, well, what if I said that to myself to get out of bed each day? What if I told myself when the alarm goes off, instead of snoozing it and being self-deprecating, I just said 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and as soon as I hit 1, we're up, period. And so she applied that concept to every area of her life and changed everything. They got completely, her and her family, out of debt, healthy relationships, stopped drinking, and she started applying it to all these different things that she was struggling with and felt like had a chokehold on her. And so with inner conflict, I find, I know earlier we said take time for things that feel emotional, but when it comes to your intuition, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, let's go. Like your intuition knows. It looks after you. It does. It's the subconscious, when you start thinking about it, that's like, oh, whoa. Well, what if you fail? What if you fuck up? What if you're not enough? What if you're not qualified? What if someone could do this better than you? What if you don't deserve that relationship? What if that person doesn't like who you really are if you show who you are, right? That's what'll start happening if you give yourself more time with it. And that's just one of the wolves. You can always do it later. Yeah. You can always do it later. And I've been, with everything with the retreat and just things really picking up here, I've definitely been pretty, like, had a full plate, and that do it later was my go-to for a while, not because I had time to do it later, but because I just didn't want to deal with facing it, right? So it's like, let's just do it. Yeah. I love that I'm not ready. You know, we see that a lot too with people in the work that like want to come to retreats, or they come to Awake here and there, and they're like, oh my God, this is so powerful and I want to do more. And then you're like, oh, well, here's this opportunity. And they're like, oh, I don't know. Or like, I don't know. That's a lot. I think I'll be ready once, blah, blah, blah. Right. We hear that all the time. And that's a very easy buffer between us and truth and doing the right thing, or at least the thing that we could potentially have make the biggest change in our life in the moment. Yeah. Okay, so I don't know if you guys have a pen and paper, or maybe in your mind's eye, you can just write this in your brain. Be completely honest. What's the biggest reason you second guess your judgment? What's the biggest reason? And again, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. First answer, go. What's the biggest reason? Fear. And if there's any why in there that's coming to fruition, it might be a nice time to write that down. Trust. Try to go deeper, Zabi. Why wouldn't you trust yourself? Why wouldn't you trust your judgment? Right? Try to go deeper. Fear. Fear of what? That's what I want to know for those of you that said fear. Imposter syndrome, scarcity. Not getting it right, so failure. Yep. What else? I mean, I think a lot of us, regret. A lot of us are in a similar place. Lack in belief of myself, fear of failure, fear of consequences, being wrong. I just want you guys for a second to zoom out and like, I don't want to invalidate your situation or underplay what you're actually feeling, but look at how ridiculous that shit is. How ridiculous it is that we're afraid to fail when we know that failing doesn't actually amount to anything or have any meaning on our self-worth. Fear of being wrong, right? Like, I get it because I'm with you guys. I'm a human being. And like, think about how ridiculous we are. Aren't we insane? Don't you think it's insane that we literally can't trust our own judgment because we're afraid of what the rest of the world will say or see? Fear of accepting some of my decisions have been made based on fear? Yeah, that's a fucking real thing there too. Nudes, you have something?
I think that what you just said is so powerful because all of the fear or imposter syndrome or scarcity or anything that comes up in these moments, the moments that we take action, or like personally, the moments I've taken action or tried the thing anyways, it's either a lesson or a gain in some form or another. Like if you go out on a night that you really don't want to go out, you either learn a lesson about like putting yourself in those situations, or you end up talking to someone that you wouldn't have met before and you all of a sudden have a new friend or connection, or you get that the hit of endorphin and dopamine from having a random interaction that was beautiful. And those experiences feed our soul so deeply. And when I started not doing the thing, and started doing this work around all of that, I started realizing that like I would rather fall on my face and eat dirt than not know what dirt tasted like. And I think that to do the thing anyways is one of the most powerful choices that we make, because if you don't, you'll never fall on your face. Like fall and then be like, wow, that tasted really shitty. And then do it a few more times. And at some point you'll like fall into a bush and eat a flower instead. Like it doesn't actually matter. But the feeling of doing it, I think, is one of the most empowering and like heart filling things that I personally do for myself, and still encounter the feeling of like, oh, maybe I don't do it, or like my house has to be perfect before I do it, whatever it is. But yeah, falling on my face and eating dirt is like one of the best things. One of my favorite activities, honestly.
Thank you for that. I so agree. It's like fail fast. Why not, right? How many times have been like, I'm never drinking again after like a crazy night out, and you're like, oh God, I'm so hungover. And then, yeah, we all know how that goes. Okay, and this is what we said earlier, right? Are you unsure? Meaning, do you not trust yourself, or do you actually have inner conflict, or are you afraid of your own potential? Like, are you afraid of what could be if you just fucking did it? If you just did it? Oh my God, right? So your eyes got huge, Brie, right? Like, because what could be if you fulfilled your, like, played out your potential? And that's super triggering for me because the feedback my parents always got when I was in school is that Ashley's really amazing and she doesn't utilize all of her potential. I was bored as fuck in school, right? So like the shit they were asking me to learn, like, yeah, I'm just gonna do a half-ass job so I can like at least get a passing grade and be done with this bullshit, right? But at the end of the day, that mentality of not applying full potential, like being like, okay, you know what? I don't know what the worst is going to happen here, but like no matter what, I'm going to figure it out because whatever the worst is going to teach me the most. And then I can continue to come back for more. And similar to the Marianne Williamson quote of, it's something along the lines of this, where she talks about being afraid of our own bright light. Like, what would happen if you actually unleashed yourself in the biggest and greatest way? And I'm even looking at you, Sunny, because I know that you just recently, launching your new thing has reinvigorated your passion for life in such a big way. And, that in there, that's you not being afraid of your own potential anymore. It's an example of that. And it doesn't matter what it is that you're producing or what it is that you're giving or what it is you're committing to, but the inner conflict is like debilitating when we are unsure about our own truth and our own light and we let ourselves talk ourselves into that darkness. It is debilitating. There's almost nothing worse. Good old rupee. Nothing tastes better than being on your own side. Or dirt, apparently. All up in your mouth. And that's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed our time together, and I certainly did. We have like 2 minutes if any of you want to share any feedback or awarenesses you had today, aha moments, opportunities to be seen and recognized in your truth, or even questions, something you're still confused about. All right, all right, all right. You guys are amazing.
Sure.
Thank you for joining me. Oh, great. Perfect.
Um, yeah, thank you so much. This was awesome. I'm so glad I got to join. I'm not feeling very well today, so I did make that decision to rest today and take time off of work, which feels really good. But I think for this, something I was thinking about is my wanting to teach and like wanting to lead and like be in yoga and like lead classes and do all these things. And I always have this in the back of my head, like, oh, I'll do it later. I'll do it later. That inner conflict of like not showing up for myself or thinking that I have anything to offer. And I still have those moments of doubt, but I think the thing that I was thinking of, like, as we were talking today and everything you shared was just, how I've taken little baby steps, right? And like reaching out and like asking, can I teach? Like, how can I get on the schedule? And like you providing that space. I get that butterfly feeling like right before, like I want to cancel. I don't want to do it anymore. And then I still show up. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh yeah, like I got that rewarding feeling of like I showed up for me today. And it felt so good. And like the class that I led on Monday felt amazing. And like the funny thing is in my head, I was thinking, you can't hear anybody. Like when you teach on Zoom, like I get your pain now, Ash, because you can't hear anybody else. So I'm like, do people really like this? Like, am I doing a good job? Should I just cancel it and walk away? And then at the end of it, it's like, oh yeah, like when I just show up for other people in love and like leave with my heart, like that's all that matters. And I think I'm like rambling now, but I think a lot of it is just showing up. And even if it's just for one person, just showing up for yourself sometimes, even if no one else shows up, like you showed up. And I think that's what matters most. And I've been reading this book, A Return to Love, and like, gosh, I'm reading it at the perfect time. And everything right now is all about love. And like, I just watched this movie last night, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Like, I'm going to watch it again. But then what you're talking about today and like just everything that we keep talking about is just about love. And so I just wanted to share that. It's been really passionate within me. And like, I'm just so grateful to be in this community with all of you beautiful people and just sharing our hearts in love. So love you guys.
Thank you. You are such a dream and a delight to be in the presence of. And your teaching, I mean, it's so obvious. And I love what you said is that like you showed up and you felt good. It's like sometimes teaching is about for you. It's not that you're there to like hold space for others because it fills your tank so much. And I love that you get a taste of that right now. And you are teaching, you're literally doing it. So this inner conflict stuff, it's like that's the filter of the story. But the truth and the reality is that you're showing up and you're recognizing your light, and it's incredible. So thank you. Yeah. You guys are amazing. I'll make sure you get a recap email with the link to the PowerPoint, and you can rewatch the recording anytime. It's all going to be on the website. And you guys know that all the webinars are like free. So if you want to share them with your friends and things like that, people that could use support in this way, please feel free to. And let me know if you guys have any questions or feedback. Please, if you're in the LA area, come take class on Friday. We've got cycle in the morning, or you can live stream if you have a bike at home. It's going to be the last live in-person class that I teach for a little over a week, since we'll be on the retreat. But we've got, a lot of amazing teachers that are going to be subbing in. Noodle's going to teach some meditations on the calendar. We've got Clohem, Kayla, Gina are all teaching while we're gone. So if you guys need anything, please feel free to reach out. I love you so much.